Hello world, it's Berto Prey 5 Qapla, and welcome to my combined review for Star Trek Lower Decks episodes 6 and 7. Episode 6 is, of course, Terminal Provocations, and episode 7, Much Ado About Boimler. Before we get into spoilers, let me start with the state of Star Trek Lower Decks, as if I was the president of Star Trek Lower Decks, and it's been a year and I'm giving the State of the Union. And last State of the Union, I would say I gave at episode 5, when I was hopeful we had 5 straight episodes of improving ratings. These are my personal ratings, obviously. I don't know how well the show's doing. No one does. CBS doesn't release those numbers. But to me, I had 5 improving episodes, and I had all the hope in the world that, in fact, I even said that if we might even get some 7 and 8 out of 10 rated episodes in coming weeks, because we had gone from a 5 to almost a 7 in those first 5 episodes. Everything looked peachy. Yes, they started off weak, but it seemed like they were getting their shit together, and I had high hopes. Then episode 6 came, and I was so taken aback and disappointed in what I just thought was a failure of an episode, that even though I couldn't get the review out the first day because Ciso Prey was here with Charlie, and I had more important things to do. I ended up not doing it at all because I just couldn't figure out how to review this show that really was disappointed me for the very first time. I try not to be disappointed by new Trek because I had this policy of not having any expectations. But hey, after 5 improving episodes, you start to have expectations. And then the expectations were dashed. So episode 6, suffice to say, I did not like much. I mean, it's a lot better than Discovery, but it was not an improvement on the previous week's episode. So it was disappointing. But still, I said, let me watch episode 7, because, hey, the 6th episode could be their first real misstep. You're getting better, you're getting better, you're getting better. You have a little bit of a setback, but you come back next week stronger than ever. You don't worry about the setback. But no, I watched episode 7, and episode 7, while maybe improvement over last week, it wasn't an improvement over the 5th episode. And so the state of Star Trek Lower Decks is worrisome, I'd put it. It is no longer improving. I also want to talk about the anatomy of Lower Decks and how it's been changing since the beginning of the series. And no, I don't mean, a naked joke, because so often we see naked crew members, and, Mariner's uniform is always open, showing some cleavage. No, I'm just talking about how the episode is put together, and frankly, how inconsistent it is. And maybe it's because it's a new series, but previous Treks, whether they were new or not, there's always been a anatomy that's worked since TNG. And you put it together, you have an opening teaser, you have the credits, you have your A plot, you have your B plot, they solve them, everybody's happy for the most part, episode over, and it all happens again next week. Once in a rare while, we'll have a third plot, or if it's a 2-parter, we'll do something interesting. But for the most part, your day-to-day episodes, teaser that goes directly into the A plot, and then you have your B plot for the episode with a couple of other people, and that's it. That's your episode. And it works. It's a formula that works. And it works when Lower Decks did it, but they only did it once. Okay? For the first 3 episodes of Lower Decks, the teaser, before the credits teaser, had nothing to do with the rest of the episode. And again, we're talking 22-minute episodes, so we don't really have a lot of time. So throwing away maybe 2 minutes of a 22-minute episode is kind of a big deal. But we got used to it. I said, fine, if Lower Decks wants to be the Star Trek that the teaser is just a one-off joke, we never worry about it again, then I will give them that, and I got used to it. But then, of course, on the 4th episode, Moist Vessel, he said, hey, let's go ahead and make the teaser mean something. And they did let it continue throughout the rest of the episode. So like, oh, maybe they went ahead and they thought about it and they're like, let's go to the working formula. I'm like, okay, cool. So the teaser is going to mean something again. And then we get to episode 5, and what did they do? They threw away the teaser completely. We started episode 5 with the credits. There was no teaser. And then we went right into the episode. You know, like, okay, episode 5 was a good episode. That worked too. So we had basically 22 continuous minutes of story without a teaser. I was like, that great, that works. I can get behind this. Credits start the episode. And what happened with episode 6, Terminal Provocations? The teaser's back, okay? But the teaser had no real follow-through in the rest of the story. And that's... And I'm going to tell you, episode 7, the teaser's back again. And the teaser does have follow-through to the rest of the story. So it's like they don't know how to build an episode. And the number of plots per episode change. Nothing is consistent. Maybe this is things they should have, I don't know, written down before they started. They planned out the season. But maybe they're just trying new things, which, let's face it, I'm trying new things, but I'm a single person doing a YouTube channel, not a big corporation with, lots of money and supposedly professionals working on these shows. This is something I might have nailed down before I started to do the work. But fine. So this is where we are. It's clear that episode to episode, you cannot count on a consistent anatomy of an episode. And honestly, that makes it harder to review. Let's start. Let's get into some spoilers. So this is your spoiler warning. Leave now or forever be spoiled. For episode 6, Terminal Provocations, the teaser is the 4 lower decks and a 5th guy, and that's the only thing that carries through, is we are introduced to a 5th lower deck person. And they're all making warp drive sounds of various starships. Of course, Boimler starts out with the Cerritos, and then Mariner comes in and like, oh, you're doing it wrong, and she does it. So he's like, and then Rutherford is like, oh, are we making warp sounds? And Tendi's all like into making warp sounds because of course she is. And then we're introduced to this other guy, Fletcher, who comes and he starts making warp sounds. And for some reason, Boimler knows what the Enterprise D at warp 4 sounds like, which is strange because the Enterprise D should have been destroyed when Boimler was, I don't know, in high school. It doesn't really make sense that he would know what the Enterprise D ever sounded like. Doesn't matter. You have a scene of 5 people standing there making these ridiculous engine sounds. And for some reason, the first officer, Ransom, happened to be walking by. He hears all these weird noises. He peeks around the corner, sees all the lower decks crew standing in a circle making dumb sounds. He calls security because he's like, something suspicious is going on deck 11. And then, of course, he jumps out and he tackles Boimler because, of course, it's got to be Boimler. He's the only one that's safe to physically attack. since, he is who he is. And he tells everybody, what's going on here, blah, blah, blah. And end of teaser. And we go into the rest of the episode, and it means nothing. It's never spoken about again. We get 3 plots in this episode, I'd say. Three main plots. All of them are about equal. The first one we get introduced to from a log by the security chief. He opens the episode after the teaser, and it involves the senior staff. And the captain is going head-to-head with another captain of a new alien species called the Drookmani. And the Drookmani are basically the Klingons from the original series. They don't look like Klingons from the original series, but they have like a villainous Klingon look, and they act like space pirates. So that's why I call them Klingons from the original series. They have no honor. There's nothing, nothing there except they're basically pirates. In fact, the captain of the Drookmani has a single eye, has an eye patch, and he's actually voiced by Martok, J.G. Hertzler, the actor who played Martok on Deep Space Nine, and of course he says "Hail Karoga." He said "Hail Karoga" on a couple of live streams. So the great J.G. Hertzler lent his voice to basically the captain of a garbage scow, which I find a little disappointing, but it was good to hear his voice again in the show. He's playing the captain of a garbage scow, and they found this old 100-plus-year-old Starfleet ship, the NCC 502, which I do believe is referenced in TOS canon at some point as being lost. And they find the wreckage of the ship, and they want to take it. They're saying it's salvage, that they have all rights to it. They discovered it. And frankly, by everything I know about law of the sea, I think they would have a pretty valid claim. But the Cerritos is there, and they said, sorry, this is Starfleet property. We can only give you a finder's fee. And the Dothraki or Game of Thrones. The Drookmani are not happy with that. The Drookmani say, no, it's ours. But the Drookmani have no weapons, apparently, which is kind of weird because pirates usually have weapons. But the Drookmani have no weapons, but what do? Just to piss off the Cerritos, they start using their tractor beam to tractor parts of the salvage into the Cerritos. The Cerritos refuses to fire back. We see Captain Freeman saying she doesn't want to start. If she fires on the ship, it'll be an act of war, and she will. She refuses to fire. That Starfleet always finds a way to peacefully coexist, and she goes on about respecting their culture or respecting their right to exist, and a lot of bullshit. And the Drookmani keep throwing things at the ship, which makes no sense because they're destroying the salvage they were there to claim. Fine, whatever. It turns out that in one of the other plots, we'll get to in a minute, they because of something that happened in the other plot, the shields are not. One of the backup shield generators is down, or the automatic repair of the shields is down. So they don't know it on the bridge, but their shields are not nearly as strong as they think they are. And after they get pummeled with a few of the space debris, and the shields start failing. She finally gives the order to fire to Lieutenant Shaxs, who has been begging to fire, even since I've been so good. Please let me target their warp core. She's like, no. She finally gives the order to fire because it's either kill them or be destroyed. And he goes to fire, and of course he waited too long, and the weapons are down, and he's pissed. So the shields are about to fail. Their weapons are down. long story short, they get saved by the actions of, say, the B plot. Okay, whatever. The Drookmani ship gets disabled, and that's basically it. The main plot. The main plot ends with them declaring victory, even though they really didn't do anything. The B plot, and by far the worst part of the episode, in my opinion, involves a new guy, Fletcher, that we've never seen before as part of the show. And it's him, Mariner, and Boimler are working on rewiring the shield something core. And Mariner's like, when it says core, it implies there'll be one, but in fact there's hundreds, maybe dozens, at least dozens of these things that they take out. They got to put in new isolinear chips and then push them back in. It really doesn't seem like that difficult. It just seems like it's work that takes a while. It doesn't seem like hard work. But they're doing it all, and of course Boimler and Mariner are pissed that they're going to miss this Choo Chu Dance, which is some social event that's going on. It looks like in the bar, and they're not going to be able to go because they're busy doing all this stuff. When Fletcher says, "You guys go, if it means that much to you, you guys go," he'll do all this work alone. You would think Boimler would say no. I mean, he did. In his credit, they did say they couldn't leave him. That's not the right thing to do. But Fletcher insists. He's like, "I got it. You would do the same thing for me," which, they wouldn't, but fine. So they leave and they go to this Choo Chu Dance. It's a lot of BS. Of course, they get back from the Choo Chu Dance, and Fletcher is shaking in his boots, or he's like knocked out. Like, "Oh my God, what happened?" He's like, "You don't understand. I got attacked. An alien attacked me, or somebody attacked me." He's in the shadows, so even though it's a flashback, you can't see who attacked him. But somebody, he says, shot him with a phaser. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't move. And they stole one of the cores of the shield matrix or whatever. And he's like going, he's scared. He's like, "Now I'm going to get court-martialed because they're going to know because it's gone." And Mariner and Boimler are like, "No, what are we talking about? We're going to find it. We're going to get it back. You had us, so we're going to help you." And of course, there's like, we just got to figure out who would have taken it. And they immediately decide, Boimler and Mariner immediately decide it had to be the shady people on Delta Shift. And we find out that they're Beta Shift people. Like Mariner's like, "What's with these Delta Shift people? It doesn't make sense. What, they do our jobs while we're sleeping?" So they go over to another part of the ship to confront the Delta Shift people and accuse them of stealing it. And like Fletcher is like going like he's being super badass. Really, he's being a jerk, but he's going crazy. He's like, "Just give us back the core, man, and this will be over." And the Delta Shift people are like, "We don't know what the fuck you're talking about." And finally they're like, "Well, when did this happen?" And just during the Choo Chu Dance. They're like, "We were at the Choo Chu Dance. We saw you there at the Choo Chu Dance." And they said, "When they made it the Choo Chu Chu Dance, I cried, and I saw you cry too." And Mary's like, "Oh shit, that really happened. They were there, so they clearly couldn't have stolen the core." Fine. So they go back to their part of the barracks or whatever it's called, where their beds are, and they're getting ready to. Fletcher's continuing to freak out, but Mariner and Boimler are getting ready to do some more searching, and Boimler looks in Fletcher's bed, and under a sheet is clearly the core. It's just Fletcher put it under a sheet. So Fletcher is an idiot. So Boimler says, "Fletcher, why is the core under, on your bed?" And he's like, "Oh my God, guys." And he's like, "That must have been what the aliens would do." He also tried to blame it on the the Drookmani. He tried to blame it on the Drookmani, but of course, Mariner and Boimler both knew there was no way the Drookmani made it on the ship and did anything. So they're like, what's it doing under there? And then he finally admits that Fletcher's like, well, you know, I'm not so smart, and I thought I could do this faster if I were smart. So I hooked the computer core up to my brain, and you see him wearing some type of freaking helmet with wires coming off that happen to fit into this computer core thing. And and then you see basically gives himself a freaking lobotomy. And somehow his consciousness transfers to the computer core, and nothing from the computer core goes into him. And he finally just has to pull it off or something. It fries his brain. He's like, oh, I thought I could get smart by just, you know, connecting this to my brain. It would be so much easier if I was smart. And I'm like, oh my God, this is terrible. And so they're like, fine, let's just whatever. They're like, you know what? Whatever, don't care. We're just going to go put that away and this will be over with. And then, of course, they go to grab it, and magically the thing just starts flying, and it's got all these wires hanging off that's being used as tentacles. And it's like, oh shit, this is a life form now. This is not just a computer core. But still, they could figure they could reformat it if they could just get it to where they needed to go. It's got Fletcher's stupid gene now, and it's fighting them, and it kind of has part number 5 is alive. It needs input. It's looking for tricorders. It's looking for any type of technology it can get its hands on. And so they're like, well, what we can do, they're like, well, we got to transport it off the ship. And then they can't get it to the transporter. It's going to be too far. It's getting bigger as they move it, because it keeps assimilating technology into it. It keeps getting bigger and bigger. So finally they say, we can't make it a transporter. Or Boimler, one of them says the airlock. Oh, okay, good. So they can get it to the airlock. They push it into the airlock. They trick it. They throw a tricorder in the airlock. It goes into the airlock. They lock the airlock behind it, open the other side, and it gets blasted out into space. And it happens to make its way over to the Drookmani ship, and it rips its hole and goes into the Drookmani ship, and that is what actually saved the Cerritos from being destroyed by the Drookmani, was when this warp core creature goes in there to cause destruction to the Drookmani. So that's what saved the previous plot. They didn't know what happened on the bridge, but this is what happened and why they got saved. So this was the B plot, or the second plot, and it just it felt so horrible. It was hard to watch. Okay, they had, frankly, I hate to bring race and gender into this, but you have another white guy, and again, he's the stupidest person on the ship. He's got to be the butt of jokes, right? Mariner has to be the hero, and so they brought Fletcher in to be like a dumb Boimler. Even though Boimler, we know Boimler's smart, but he is often the butt of jokes. He's often the person who gets insulted and dehumanized. And they brought in Fletcher because I guess they thought we were just doing a little too much to Boimler. So we bring in another white dude, Fletcher, and he'll be our punching bag for this episode. And man, is he a punching bag. And he is so scared. He keeps saying, oh, he's going to get thrown out of Starfleet and blah, 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 blah. And I'll tell you how we finished this B plot, because the A and B plots kind of merge a little at the end. But let's go to the one redeeming arc in this episode, and I'll call this the C plot. The C plot is, of course, again, Tendi and Rutherford. They are talking, and apparently Tendi, Rutherford is like, oh, I wonder what's out in all that space junk. And he's like, we'll probably have to do a spacewalk to catalog it later. And Tendi gets all like, oh, no, spacewalk. Oh, my God. It turns out Tendi never actually did the spacewalk at the Academy. She just, by a filing error, she got a B, which on a personal note, I find a little funny, because if you've ever heard me tell the story, I think I got a B in Calc 2 in college due to a filing error. But that's another story for another time. So she really feels like she doesn't know how to spacewalk. So Rutherford's like, I've been working on a holodeck simulator that can teach you to do anything, any lesson that you ever need. My holodeck program can do it. So she's like, oh, thank you. So Rutherford and Tendi go to the holodeck, and he starts up, and he calls it whatever, beta 2.5. So he says it's a beta program. And this was the funniest part of the episode. We meet Badgy, and if you've watched any other Lower Decks, you probably know who Badgy is, but for those who haven't, Badgy is a Starfleet insignia-looking comm badge thing with a smiling face and hands and legs, and it looks and is supposed to remind us of Clippy, the Microsoft Office assistant that everybody hated. Like you started Microsoft Word, and Clippy would come up and says, I think you want to write a letter. And I'm like, oh, fuck you, Clippy. Go the fuck away. I used Microsoft Word for 10 years. I don't need freaking stupid paperclip animated thing to tell me how to do what I already know how to do. And like the biggest thing was how to disable Clippy. That's what people wanted to know. So Badgy comes up, and he's like, I think, ask me anything. I can teach, what do you want a lesson? What lesson do you want? And so Rutherford says, okay, Badgy, we want to learn how to spacewalk. And Badgy's like, super. He's like, I can do that. And then he's in the middle of doing it. Of course, he pauses, and there's like a loading bar that goes across his head. And like, Rutherford admits it takes him a little bit. It takes him a little bit to do anything. So the loading bar goes across his head, and he creates this great hologram simulation. It puts them into a spacesuit, and they leave the airlock, and he's like, it's just jump and magnet, and they jumping from space debris to space debris and activating their magnetic boots, and she's getting, in 10 seconds, of course, she's getting the hang of it. Yay. And then Badgy comes. Oh, they get their magnetic boots get drawn together. So Tendi and Rutherford are kind of, face to face embraced with their boots together. And of course, Rutherford has a crush on Tendi, but for some reason, Tendi doesn't realize it. So Rutherford was trying to impress Tendi this entire time. So he was like, oh, this is kind of cool. Rutherford was having the best time of his life. And then, of course, Badgy shows up again, and he's like, okay, Badgy, whatever. Then while this was happening, due to what was happening in the A plot and the Drookmani throwing pieces of the salvage at the Cerritos and its power being drained, we get the computer announces that due to low energy, the safeties are offline. Like, that doesn't make any sense. Okay, if the power was low, they would shut the holodeck down. They wouldn't shut the safeties down. That doesn't save. Shutting down the safeties doesn't save power. Shutting down the holodeck would save power. And you do see the holodeck kind of flash on and off, but the holodeck comes back on without the safeties. So at this point now, we find Badgy. Now that Badgy knows the safeties are off, he's actually a crazy and angry. And in Badgy's defense, Rutherford did kick him to get because he was loading something and he got stuck. So Rutherford kicked Badgy to get it loading again, like you would kick an old television or something. So we realize Badgy does have feelings, and with the safeties on, Badgy was unable to do anything about it. But once the safeties came off, Badgy, is a homicidal maniac, apparently. So it was kind of fun. So Badgy attacks Rutherford. He bites through his spacesuit. And so Rutherford knows they're there. Rutherford and Tendi are trying to jump away. And before Rutherford passes out from lack of air, I guess, he changes he can't end the simulation. He tried to end the holodeck, end simulation or close program. None of that worked. But what he was able to do was switch to different programs. So he went from being in space to being on Voyager. And for whatever reason, Badgy followed them to the different programs, even though, I don't think Badgy would be part of those programs. So they end up on a market in Voyager, and Rutherford and Tendi quickly got to put on local Voyageran clothes so they blend in. And Badgy materializes in the town square and starts ripping people's arms and heads off. And there's blood squirting everywhere. So Badgy has gone totally criminally insane. And he's like, I'm going to rip your eyes out. I'm going to tear your head off. I'm going to slit you, I'm going to pull you apart. He's just in this really crazy, insane way. He's just saying he's going to do these awful, awful things when he reaches Rutherford and Tendi. So they start running up a big staircase to what looks like a monastery on top of a mountain. And Badgy is running up the stairs too, but they're all getting slower and slower because, it takes a lot to run up, a mountain. And Rutherford's like, it's surprising he hasn't murdered us yet. And they look, and they're surprised to see Badgy is slowing down too. And Rutherford's like, he shouldn't be affected by this. And Rutherford thinks, he's like, I wonder if he's affected by this, if we could freeze him out. So then he changes it again to an ice planet. And him and Tendi still got to keep tracking through the snow. And I would think they would succumb to the cold first. But after a few minutes, it's obvious Badgy just kind of freezes. He can't do it anymore. So Rutherford goes back. He tells Tendi to keep going. Rutherford goes back to try and, ultimately stop Badgy. Him and Badgy have a final fight. But Rutherford, and again, early on, we found Rutherford has a way to become a badass fighter in his implant. But again, he doesn't use it. He just does his own fighting. He should have turned on his implant. But they fight Badgy. And finally, Badgy is too weak to continue. And Rutherford, and Badgy's calling Rutherford father, by the way. So he really feels for Badgy to a point, but he knows he's got to kill Badgy. It's him or them. So he breaks Badgy's neck, and Badgy just dies. And sure enough, about that time, the power comes back on, and everything restarts. And Badgy, and they didn't know if Badgy was going to reappear or not, but the holodeck kind of reboots, and Badgy is back, and he's seems like his normal self, but of course they zoom in on his eyes and you can tell. And Tendi asks, she's like, I wonder if he remembers he tried to kill us. And even though they don't answer it conclusively, it's pretty clear, yes, he remembers. And he's like, can I teach you a lesson? And they're like, no. We were just leaving. So they leave the holodeck, and you just see Badgy's eyes. And you can tell that he's a homicidal maniac. And hopefully, perhaps Badgy will come back again at some point. But even if he didn't, that was the funniest part. I did laugh when I saw Badgy because it brought back all the memories of Clippy. And it was the only real part of this episode I found funny. At the end of the episode, I was like, man, I found the Fletcher thing actively insulting. I found that arc just completely boring. this Choo Choo Dance was stupid. The fact that you could just put a helmet on and transfer a part of your consciousness into a computer, and the computer becomes not only does it become sentient, it can just fly because reasons. It can just float and fly because of reasons, and wires become tentacles because reasons. I mean, wires don't have motors in it to move, but whatever. It's cartoon, I guess. And none of this makes sense. Even for my suspension of disbelief, it was more than I could take. I found the Fletcher character an insult to men. I found it an insult that once again race is coming into play, where the white guy has to be the bad guy, really, the idiot. And they double down again in the next episode. So it's not like this is I already have episode 7 in mind, because I'm telling you, it just keeps going. The good people, the smartest people, the best people are women and non-white men. And the bad, the dumb, the idiots are white men. And it's just so much. It's like, for fuck's sake, give us one good guy. And you say, oh, we got Ransom. Well, give us one guy that's actually in the show for more than 30 seconds. How about that? We got one episode where Ransom had one decent part, and it was one of the better shows, better episodes. Give us freaking, how about somebody who's just not an idiot? Fletcher was like your typical frat boy. He was even in the, wherever they were eating, they'd eat. And he was just eating directly from a replicator. The replicator was just dumping food like directly into his mouth. And he was like, he's going to go for the record. He's going to go for the record. And there was actually a decent scene. Mariner they were all cheering Fletcher along, and Mariner fell backwards a little and pushed Dr. Tana, the cat woman, into nachos. And Dr. Tana gets up and is like, do you have any effing idea how hard it is to get cheese out of fur? And Mariner was like, oh, I'm sorry. And she's like, don't, I know who you are. You're whatever. You're a disappointment and blah, blah, blah. And like, you should work on, if you don't want to, if you don't want to do your job, you should go work on Starbase 80. And somebody was like, Starbase 80. Oh my God. Like, everybody knew Starbase 80 was like the worst place to be. And Mariner was getting ready to fight her. And then Fletcher, this is when I had hope, right? This is what happened. This is what's happening. When we first meet Fletcher, he comes over and he's a natural born diplomat. He comes over with a hot towel and another sink of nachos for the cat lady. And he's like, here you go. And the cat woman is like, oh, you see, at least somebody here appreciates rank. And he solves the issue. And like, oh, good. We actually have a capable white guy in this episode. I was like, oh, this is what upset me, because they tricked me. They tricked me into thinking they actually put in a capable white guy. And then, of course, it's all gone. It's all gone. And Boimler was like, yeah, when we were in the academy, he was always so good at resolving disputes. There were a couple of Nausicaans that wanted to kill him, which is, of course, what happened to Captain Picard when he did the Q flashback. Those were Nausicaans who wanted to kill Picard and his friends. He's like, yeah, there was the 2 Nausicaans that were going to kill me, said Boimler. He's like, but Fletcher got them to just spit in my face instead. So, I mean, Boimler still, again, becoming butt of a joke. He gets Nausicaan spit in his face, but I guess it's better than being killed. So that was actually not a terrible scene either. So at the end of the episode, where all the plots kind of come together, they come down to the lower decks. The senior crew come down to the lower decks and says, okay, what happened here? We have somebody opened the airlock. There's a missing computer core. You guys have a lot of explaining to do. And Mariner says, oh, we'll explain. And then we cut to a scene, and Fletcher is getting, of course, a big commendation from the senior crew. They said that basically Mariner and Boimler don't want to deal with Fletcher anymore. So they told the senior crew that Fletcher was the genius who saved the ship. So Fletcher gets a promotion. Not only does he get the recognition, he gets a promotion to lieutenant, and he's getting a transfer to the Titan, which, of course, at this time was the ship that Captain Riker should have been commanding. So I thought maybe we'd get to see Captain Riker. No such luck. We just hear that he's being transferred to the Titan, and we find that Boimler wanted to be transferred to the Titan. So they're like, well, whatever, we're done with Fletcher. He's gone. And then the very last scene, Mariner and Boimler get a call, and it's Fletcher. It's 1 week later, and Fletcher said he was fired. It's like, can you believe they fired me just because I was dumping garbage in the warp core? Like, what happened? What does it matter? Everything gets vaporized anyway. And they pretend that they're getting subspace interference, and Mariner says there's a queue. They can't talk to him right now, and they disconnect. And end of episode. So Fletcher got fired. He's Earth's problem now, and that was the episode. Yeah, it was not a great episode. In fact, it was downright insulting. It hurt. And if I had to give it a score, I'd say it is at best, a 5 out of 10. And that's all because of Badgy. If Badgy wasn't in this episode, we're looking at a 3 out of 10. Badgy saved this episode. And a 5 out of 10 is, I believe, perhaps the worst score since the first episode, or the worst score at all. I believe it's the worst score since the first episode. So all of the improvements they had over the first 5 episodes completely gone with this basically insulting episode of Trek. So now we get to episode 7, and the teaser is back, and it carries through the rest of the episode. The teaser starts where Tendi creates her own new dog. She creates this dog from scratch. She sequenced its genes or whatever from scratch, and everybody is exhausted. They all want to go to sleep, but this dog is jumping around, jumping, and they're all kind of annoyed at Tendi for bringing over the dog. Even Rutherford, who is otherwise in love with Tendi, he doesn't want to deal with this right now. And Tendi is just so excited. They're like, it just looks like a normal dog. She says, yes, that's exactly what she was going for. But she improved the dog and blah, 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 blah. And she goes back to get some notes. And Rutherford looks at the dog and says, this is just a normal dog. She's playing us. And Boimler and Mariner are like, they just want to go to sleep. And it's fine. Everybody sleeps in their uniforms, which I guess is good for us. So they're just asleep, want to go to sleep. And the dog, while Tendi isn't there, turns itself almost upside down. Its legs turn, its legs move, its head moves. And so it's now walking more like an insect, and its eyes glow, and it walks up the wall onto the ceiling. And they finally realize, okay, this is not a normal dog. And they're like, okay, whatever. And that's Mariner says, wake her up if there's something she needs to worry about. The dog walking on the ceiling wasn't enough to care about. Okay, so the teaser ends, and we get an update that the senior staff are going on a covert mission, and we see them dressed in the black uniforms, so you only really see their faces, and they're doing practice. They're doing their covert practices, and we find out there's going to be a visiting captain coming to the ship, and Mariner is so annoyed that there's another captain. She doesn't want to deal with meeting another captain, and in fact, a whole new staff, just temporary. She's like, these are the worst, and she brings up Jellicoe. She's like, I don't want a Jellicoe type babysitting. How would she know Jellicoe? Is Jellicoe's only mission is to be temporary captains, to be temporary captain around the entire fleet? I know they want to throw in member berries, And yes, Jellicoe was, of course, the most famous visiting captain on the Enterprise, maybe the only visiting captain. But it doesn't make any sense Mariner would know who Jellicoe was. And it doesn't make any sense that Boimler would have understood what she said. Even if by some chance she happened to know Jellicoe, why would Boimler know who Jellicoe was? It doesn't make any sense. So that's starting to annoy me when they start putting in references that don't even make any sense. Like, okay, fine. Yeah, I guess she knows who the Q is. Maybe they know who the Traveler is. I could understand that, hey, that was in a Starfleet bulletin. They read up on it. It was, very unique life form. People understood it. I don't understand how day-to-day stuff like a visiting captain to the Enterprise being Captain Jellicoe and him being kind of annoying to the crew makes any news in Starfleet. That doesn't make any sense. So she brings up this Jellicoe reference that already upset me. Long story short, it turns out the visiting captain is actually a friend of Mariner, a friend from Mariner from when they were in the academy. And instead of being all angry, it's like her best friend from the academy. And they look almost exactly alike. Somehow this captain actually looks even a little younger than Mariner, if I had to guess. And how is she already a captain? Because, and this is the biggest problem. In a previous episode, and I don't remember which one it is, and I don't care enough to look it up, Mariner and Boimler were told to be the same age. Okay? Mariner and Boimler were said to be the same age. And at the time they said that, I didn't like it because it didn't make a hell of a lot of sense. Mariner should be older. Mariner has already served on a few different ships. Mariner has already said she's been out there. She's seen things. So Mariner should, maybe Mariner is older, but if Mariner is older, and the way I headcanonized it is maybe Mariner started Starfleet Academy late. Okay? Maybe she started it late, but then once we saw a flashback and we saw she really was in uniform, doing the things she talked about, and she wasn't doing it as a civilian child of a captain, but she was doing it as a Starfleet officer, then it all started falling apart. So they have to nail down what Mariner's age is and who she went to the academy with. Because they made it seem like she went to the academy at the same time as Boimler. But in this episode, she went to the academy as the same time as Captain Ramsy is the visiting captain. But Captain, how is it possible that this other woman became captain? Now I know Mariner is eternally an ensign because she refuses promotions, and when she does get promotions, she gets dropped down. But are we really supposed to believe that she could have been captain? That she's been in Starfleet long enough to be captain? In fact, her friend Captain Ramsy said everybody thought Mariner was going to be captain first, and she's still an ensign. And even the other members of Ramsey's crew who come over, Vulcan, the first, I think, Vulcan we see to have a line in Lower Decks, she says, "Curious, you're still an ensign," which is curious if her friend could make captain. But if her friend could make captain, why is Boimler still an ensign? Boimler is Mr. Starfleet, or Rutherford or Tendi. Maybe Rutherford and Tendi are fresh out of the academy. But if Boimler and Mariner had missions together, knew each other, or at least have been in Starfleet at the same time, Boimler should be at least a lieutenant, if not a commander, let alone a captain. Why does this other woman get to be a captain and Boimler not? Okay, yeah, we have theories, but it doesn't make any sense. And this is what upsets me. We don't know how old Mariner is, and they've gone completely against the previous story. If the answer is Mariner has been in Starfleet, for 10 years or 8 years or 6 years, and is still an ensign, then so be it. That actually makes more sense. But then Mariner needs to be older than Boimler. And we have to know that. We can't get the dialogue that says that, they're anywhere near the same age or went to school at the same time. So that's the most annoying part of this episode. What I do like about this episode is that they've changed up the usual. Usually it's Boimler, Mariner, and Rutherford and Tendi. Instead, in this episode, we've got Rutherford with Boimler, and then later we'll have Boimler with Tendi. And Mariner's kind of on her own, and Rutherford kind of doesn't get much play in this episode except for when he's needed. So Boimler is still so interested in making a good impression on the visiting captain. He goes over to Rutherford and he wants Rutherford to tell him which way his hair looks better. And Rutherford's getting annoyed because he's working on a new transporter that's half a second faster than the old transporter. And he's like, but nobody will volunteer to help me test the transporter. So how am I supposed to, get the bugs out if nobody's going to help me test it? Which obviously you start transporting back and forth objects first. You don't start with human beings, for Christ's sakes. But of course, Boimler's like, oh, I'll help you test. So Boimler runs into one of the two transporters that are next to each other, and Rutherford transports him to the other one, and everything works fine. And Rutherford's like, yay, a success, half a second faster, or 0.7 seconds, whatever it was, faster than normal. And of course, Boimler's like, oh, good, let's do it again. So then Rutherford transports him back to the other pad he was just on. And of course, that's where the problem begins. And he looks like he gets 99.9% of the way through transporting, and it stops. And now we have a phased Boimler who is visible, but a blue glowing ghost. And he's also making a loud noise. And he's like, how am I alive? What's happening? And Rutherford says, you're only 0.1 millicochranes or whatever off. It's just cosmetic. You're fine. It's just cosmetic. But he's got this terrible hum around him, and he's blue and half transparent, translucent and blue. So he's like, I can't go meet the crew, but Rutherford has nothing he can do for him. So instead of going to sick bay or calling anybody, he just goes about his day, and he goes up to bridge to where he had bridge duty. And the visiting captain is like, what the hell is wrong with you, Ensign? Get the hell off the bridge. Go to sick bay. So he's like, but I'm not sick. She's like, get to sick bay. So fine. He goes to sick bay. The cat woman keeps poking him with stuff. And he's like, am I going to be okay, Doc? She's like, how the hell do I know? You're like a freaking walking science project. And again, the cat doctor is one of my favorite characters on this show. And she was strong again this week. You're like a walking science fair project. I don't know what's going on. But she said, don't worry. I called Division 14. And I'm like, what's the first we hear about Division 14? She's like, Division 14 deals with the, medical mysteries that she can't deal with. They're almost like Section 31, but not as secretive. And they're supposedly famous for fixing all the strange medical phenomena. And she says, you're going to go with them. There's this big, they call it, I think they call it the farm. And it's this big, beautiful spa-like retreat where you get the best care, you get the best care in the Federation, plenty of doctors and nurses and everybody to help you. And she's like, it's a beautiful place. You'll be happy there. And it's be like a vacation, and you'll, don't worry about it. In the meantime, Rutherford did figure out how to stop the annoying noise, but that's all he was able to stop. He ran a tricorder over him and got the noise to stop, but he's still blue and glowy. So the doctor says, and you're going to be going to that thing, and she points to Tendi's dog, is going with you. And Tendi also goes with them. So we see the Division 14 ship come in, and this is kind of weird because it appears to not travel by warp. It appears to travel through, I don't know if this is supposed to be some type of hyper, transwarp drive or something, but there's clouds, like black, dark clouds in space, and it comes out of these things, and it just shows up, and it's a black starship. I know, I said, wouldn't it be cool if we had a black Federation ship? And it's a dark black Federation ship Doesn't look anything like a Federation ship. There's no saucer section. It has like a tail fin. It's a very weird design. Anyway, the Division 14 guy turns out to be, I have to pronounce this right, an Edazoian. That is, if you watched Star Trek, the animated series, the 3-armed guy that sat next to Sulu with the long neck, and he replaced Chekhov in the animated series. He's an Edazoian. So again, we've got this alien. He's got 3 arms. He's drawn very similar to the guy in the animated series, but updated. He's wearing a Starfleet uniform, and he has this like devilish laugh, like the laugh of a supervillain. And he's like, "Oh, if you come on my ship, you are consenting to, all this weird crap." And so, okay, they go on the ship, and they get tossed into this big holding room, and you look all around and you see all the medical mysteries, all the medical mistakes, all the freaks, all the Starfleet freaks are being held in this giant room. You got a guy who's getting older and younger at the same time. He's kind of the main freak. There's people with multiple eyes all over their body. There's a guy holding his own head. There's a lot of mutant-looking people. And there is also, and this was the funny part for me, there is a full-sized Voyager Warp 10 Salamander creature. Presumably an unfortunate Starfleet person went Warp 10 and turned into a salamander. And for whatever reason, they don't know how to undo it, even though Voyager's doctor was able to turn not only Tom Paris, but also Captain Janeway back from being a salamander back into a human. I guess your day-to-day doctors don't know what to do with it. So the salamander is just there, like laying on a bio bed or something. And they're like, did that used to be a man? And the Quasimodo-looking guy who's getting older and younger at the same time says, we think it was. So okay, fine. I will bring up, only because I have to, that salamander was not supposed to be able to survive in an oxygen atmosphere, right? And the whole thing of Voyager was that he was evolving and he couldn't breathe normal air. He had to go to a planet that had this other weird atmosphere. But whatever, okay, it's a cartoon, it's fun. Ha, we got the salamander, I'm okay with it. But technically, the salamander should be dead if it doesn't have its own atmosphere to breathe. Mariner and her friend, Captain Ramsy, asks Mariner to be the first officer while she's in command. And Mariner accepts. And she's like, it's going to be so much fun to be with a friend again. And we're like, okay, fine. First, I think, well, wow, we're going to see Mariner actually be good at her job because, she wants to be. But instead, we see Mariner fail at everything. Like every little thing they try to do, Mariner screws it up. Like stuff we know Mariner used to be able to do. Mariner was able to spacewalk just fine in a previous episode where she had to save something. But now she doesn't know how to use her gravity boots. It's ridiculous. And I'm like, I'm mad at first because I'm like, we know Mariner can do this. Why is she all of a sudden being painted as an idiot? Which I didn't feel too bad at. Like, well, she is kind of a screw up. So compared to real good Starfleet officers, she might look like an idiot. But just like they were overdoing it. And then, of course, we find out that Mariner was purposely overdoing it, and her friend realized it too. Mariner knew everything, knew what to do. She was purposely acting like an idiot because she didn't want her friend to offer her a higher rank, a command, and a transfer. She didn't want to rank up, quote unquote, rank up for her friend, which again is so ridiculously stupid. And at the end, her friend is like, well, the offer still stands. If she's like, listen, if there was anyone I'd rank up for, it'd be you. But she's like, I still need some more time as Lower Decks. How much more time could she possibly need as Lower Decks? Her other friend has gone from lower decks to captain, and she is still in lower decks. It doesn't make any sense, but I jumped ahead here. The Cerritos main crew, they left to go on a secret mission where apparently they've got to plant some bean or something on some other planet. So in the meantime, Captain Ramsy, who has her own staff, which includes a Vulcan woman, a Trill woman, and I'm very annoyed that the Trills, for whatever reason, their spots have changed from blue, right? Jadzia had like dark blue spots to peachy, kind of brown, light brown, peachy spots. I don't understand why they had to change the color of the Trill spots. This is the second Trill we've seen with these color spots. So I thought maybe it was just that one Trill had the different spots. No. So now this is like a rule that Trills have different color spots and they're all kind of peachy. And then there's this other alien that I've never seen before that I can only assume was inspired by the band Kiss, because he would look right at home in Kiss. I have no idea what race he is. I don't know if he's a race we've seen before, but he looks new to me. And then Mariner joins them as first officer, which you would think wouldn't these other lieutenants and commanders have some qualms about taking orders from an ensign, but apparently not. So the first mission, they have to go down to some planet that's full of mud, and they got to fix a water filtration system. And like Mariner's going in the wrong direction, and she goes in the right. So they're like, okay, come, we have to go this way. And then they get to this big machine, and the machine is starting to overload or something. And like, quick, we need our tricorders. And for whatever reason, you know, people always carried their own tricorders in Star Trek. But now Mariner was supposed to be carrying the tricorders for everyone. Like, she's first officer and her job is to carry everyone's tricorder. It's like, Mariner, where's the tricorders? And she's like, I left them back on the ship. Like, what? And the Vulcan's like, that's the least useful place they could be. Like, yeah, dumb. And so, but the captain says takes out some type of freaking stick and says, just use a subsonic pulse, try to clear it. And sure enough, it worked. And then the dirty water in the machine turned clear, and the aliens that live in the mud, she said, don't worry, you're going to have clean water again. And everybody's happy, and everybody, at the end, everybody's looking at Mariner like she's a complete idiot, which she kind of is, but we know she isn't that stupid. So they go back up, everybody's okay, but of course nobody trusts Mariner anymore. We get an update from the Cerritos crew that says they may or may not have to plant the plant. And like Captain Ramsy is like joking when after they sign off, she's like, so they might have to plant the plant. This is ridiculous. So then they're waiting to rendezvous with another ship. I'm going to pronounce this all right. Rubidoux. I don't know. It's apparently some town in California, because it's another California class ship. So the Rubidoux doesn't make contact. They're running late. They tell Mariner to do a scan. Of course, Mariner's like, oh, she doesn't know how to do a scan. She accidentally does a red alert because she's really, really, really pretending to be stupid, which is really stupid to watch. Meanwhile, back on the on this Division 14 ship, they're calling themselves freaks. The freaks are saying it's time. First, Boimler's like, don't worry, we'll all be okay once we get to the farm. And the freaks are like, what do you mean, you idiot? There's no farm. I've been on this ship for 7 months. This is the farm. And Tendi and Boimler are kind of like worried. Could this really be that there's no farm? That's just a lie they tell people to put them in this place and keep them hidden forever. So like literally everybody here believes that they're never going to see the world again. And so Tendi is not a freak. Tendi's a normal person. She just accompanied the dog for some reason. So once Tendi walks out, all the freaks get together and they say, it's time, we're going to take the ship. when the shifts change, even though the only other person we see on this ship is the captain. We don't see anyone else on this ship but the captain and the freaks. So when the shifts change tonight, they're gonna take the ship and then they're gonna find a planet to call their own, so that they can live a normal life together with the other freaks, so nobody has to call them a freak. And so, of course, Boimler, being Boimler, immediately goes and tells the captain what they're up to, and the captain grabs a big gun and comes in and says, "Boimler told me what you're all planning. There's not going to be any mutiny on this ship." And like the head Quasimodo, half old, half young guy, who's got like a spear in his hand and stuff, says, "What do you mean mutiny? No, these were just instruments we were using for our musical performance." And then the captain leaves Boimler behind, and all the freaks are, of course, getting ready to kill Boimler. And they get Boimler into an airlock. They're going to space Boimler when he lifts up his shirt for some reason, and he suddenly stops phasing. And like, oh, he's back to normal. Yay. And the guy's Quasimodo is like, "Oh, yeah, you're back to normal. How good for you. We're still going to space you." And he pushes the button. The airlock opens. And instead of being sucked into space and dying, Boimler rolls out, and he looks, and it's a beautiful green resort. And they're actually at the farm. And the captain comes out. He's like, "Yep, this is he's like, they're like, "The farm is real?" And he's like, yeah, I guess I should have just spoken to you guys a little more," which is what Boimler suggested, that they just sat down and spoke. And Ham's like, "Yeah, sorry about that. I guess I just should have talked to you. It would have prevented the mutiny. I'm sorry." Anyway, they're on the farm, and yes, there's nurses, there's doctors. They're getting served drinks. It's like a resort. There's actually quite a few people who have the Captain Pike wheelchair who got exposed to Delta radiation, and now instead of just being in the wheelchair, they're in the wheelchair with like a mix with like, I don't know, like a Mai Tai or something, sitting on the wheelchair for them to drink with a straw. And like one of them has like a Hawaiian shirt over the chair. They're like all there at the resort. The Salamander guy is getting a rub down. He's getting like oil or whatever rubbed into his skin from a couple of nurses. And then, of course, a couple of nurses come over and say, "Oh, we call Boimler." They don't know what that. "We call this guy. He's very cute." And then a Quasimodo guy comes over and says, "He's not even supposed to be here. He's not a freak anymore." And the nurses are like, "What? You're not a freak anymore?" He's like, "Well, I have acid reflux. That's kind of freakish." And no, they throw him into a shuttlecraft. He has to leave. And of course, Tendi leaves with him, I suppose, though I didn't see her in the shuttlecraft, but she was never supposed to be there to begin with. So Tendi says goodbye to the dog. And it turns out the dog can speak and fly and do all these other amazing things. When they talk to Tendi, like, what, you knew the dog could do all this stuff? She's like, yeah. She's like, well, we never had any dogs on Orion. She didn't know dogs weren't supposed to be able to speak. She didn't know dogs weren't supposed to be able to do all these things. Apparently, she didn't know what a dog was supposed to be at all. So she actually didn't code the dog wrong. She coded the dog for what she intended it to be. It came out right, but it really it didn't make any sense. It didn't make any sense. It was a stupid scene where the dog literally just flies away off a dock and tells Tendi, thank you and whatnot, and hope she's okay. So back on the Cerritos, they were looking for this other ship, the Rubidoux. It was late. They find it. The power's out. And so they decide that they got to go beam over. Captain Ramsy is like, "Oh, I told this captain they had to reset their power coils last month. I bet they never did." So the power's out. They beam over, like, "We just got to go find them. They're probably all held up in some safe room somewhere. We're going to save them again." Of course, they get over, there's no power, there's no gravity. So they're in space suits. And this is where we find that, Mariner pretends she doesn't know how to use her spacesuit. So Mariner and Ramsy go looking for the crew. They find them behind a big door. And so they said, "Oh, we're here. You're safe. We're going to turn the power back on. It'll be okay." And the captain of the ship is like, "No, don't turn the power back on. The alien is still out there." Like, "What alien? There's no alien." It's like, "We turned the power off on purpose because it feeds on power." And of course, before Ramsy can tell the Vulcan chick not to turn the power on, power comes on. And then this blue glowing alien-looking thing starts ripping apart the ship and like going after the crew, and like they all got to run. They make it to the bridge. Mariner says, "If we make it to the bridge, we might still be able to get a transporter signal," because they couldn't get a signal down where they were. So they all have to try to make it to the bridge. And now Mariner is in typical Mariner badass mode. So this is where the captain realized that Mariner was playing her all along. So they all make it to the bridge. The regular transporter can't get a lock. So somehow Mariner knew Rutherford was playing with his own version of the transporter. So she says, "Rutherford, we need your transporter." And Rutherford beams everybody on. Of course, they're all phasing, but it's only cosmetic. They're alive. So they're all happy they're alive. And apparently it just wears off on its own. So no big deal. And then they look out and they see the alien vessel the other starship gets consumed completely by the alien. And it's the alien that we saw in the first episode of Next Generation, Encounter at Farpoint. The alien that was being used as a space station. At the very end of that episode, you see it's light blue and its tentacles come out. It's very, very similar looking alien, if not the exact alien, certainly a very related species. Of course, the captain says that, Captain Ramsy still at this point, says that they don't know much about this alien. They don't have any way to classify it, but they do believe it's peaceful, that it was just looking for a home. And I guess they're happy to give it a starship to be its home. And so all is good. And then the end scene, we got Ramsy and Mariner in the bar. So Captain Ramsy keeps asking Mariner, has she seen Ransom's torpedo yet? And Mariner's like, "Oh no, don't even go there." Even though they did show attraction to each other in a previous episode, that storyline just stopped. There was some attraction, but it just completely stopped. So Ransom comes up to Captain Ramsy and Mariner and sees Ramsy and says, well, the beautiful Captain Ramsy. And he does put his arm on her shoulder. He says, "I'd love to buy you a drink." Not that they buy drinks. But she takes that putting his arm on her shoulder as an invitation to literally throw him over her with one arm, throw him over her and crash him into a table. And she says, "Sorry, Ransom, instincts kicked in," and she'll take a pause on that drink. Ramsy and Mariner laugh and walk away. Like, ha ha ha, it's so funny. You threw the first officer of the Cerritos across a bar into a table, could have broke his arm, God knows what. But it's all so funny, we'll just leave, because whatever. He's just another white guy. Also in the same scene, Tendi actually meets a real dog, and she goes up to the dog and say, "Oh, hey girl, how are you?" And all the dog does is lick her face. And Tendi's like, ew, like what's this? So apparently Tendi really didn't know what dogs do. She did not want an animal that would just lick her face. She wanted the animal she created. And that's really it. The end of the episode, we never see the rest. We never see the senior crew come back from their mission. It just ends. It ends there. Although we do see Ransom's back, so I guess they're back from their mission. But the other captain is still on board, so I don't know what. I am assuming Freeman is back in command at the end of the episode, but the other crew is just there to have a little rest and relaxation before they leave, I guess. That was it. Like I said, it wasn't the worst episode. And if this episode was the first episode or the second, it probably would be better. But the fact that they screw with the timeline of a mariner's age, and once again, the white guy is the receiver of violence, and the women, particularly the women of color, are in the complete dominant position. It's getting a little tiring to always have the same formula. You can look at the characters and based on their skin color and gender, figure out who's going to be the hero and who's going to be the zero. It's predictable and it's boring and it's stupid. On this own, if this was one single episode, if this was the first episode, I might go ahead and even give this a 7. But no, from where it is, I'm hard-pressed to give this. And it was better than the previous episode, but not by much. So in the end, I'm going to give this a 5.25 out of 10. A little bit better than the previous episode. Nowhere near as good as some of the other episodes of Lower Decks. And the main reasons for this score is, one, the fact that they're breaking their own canon as to Mariner's age and background. 2, the fact that, once again, the white guy is the loser. And 3, the Captain Jellicoe joke that was just thrown in for Memberberry's sake literally has no place in the story. It doesn't further the story at all. Most of the other Memberberries they throw in actually serve some purpose. They actually do. So 5.25 out of 10 for Much Ado About Boimler. And to be honest, that's also a stupid title. And I know this was a long review, especially being 2 reviews in one. I'm not going to do that anymore, but we'll see how it came out. I tried something a little different. We'll see. With that, guys, please remember to like, comment, share, subscribe. Please check out the Birdo Prey 5X channel. You can find a link to it on birdoprey5.com. It has some extra content. And with that, Qapla and bird out.